Hey everybody, welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture. This week, we talk about
IPFS and then Arweave.
For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen. Guys, how are you today?
Doing well. Waking up.
Doing good.
Quick story. So I'm outside and I see this like blonde looking Sam. I have a German Shepherd and I see him running across the front lawn. And my dad had seen it the other day and we thought it was a coyote. And I saw it run. I'm like, man, that's a big coyote, because coyotes are, they're decently small. And what I just found out is that did I tell you this story? It was a Mexican wolf. Have you guys ever heard of that?
You were telling me about it.
Was that? Yeah. How's that possible? That's quite far from. I was about to say, like, did you even look at the videos of the drone shots and the stuff from the ranch? Like, how does that get there?
Well, so he's just been circling my property. He's been going. I've been missing chickens, day after day, and I thought it was one of the dogs. Turns out, and I didn't know a Mexican coyote. Maybe that's not the right terminology. My neighbor told me.
No, I was looking it up. It's a thing. They're like native to Mexico, but they're not. It's not like this one traveled from Mexico up there. There's a bunch apparently in like Arizona, New Mexico. And so you're not far from that border.
This sounds like a conspiracy against the cat, Stephen. This is such a conspiracy against your cat, man. I'll take the cat. If you just say you want to get rid of it, I'll take it.
He's doing his job. He's killing mice. So anyway, let's jump into it. So IPFS, Arweave. This was an interesting exercise because I knew nothing or very little about Arweave. And so I'm excited to talk about this. And I think the best way to kick things off is just a simple explanation on IPFS and then Arweave. And you guys can, Brock, do you feel better about IPFS or Arweave? Or actually, I'll ask you, John, because Brock, you're probably deeper into Arweave, right?
I'm more into IPFS, but IPFS and semi-Filecoin. But Brock, I think it's better that you take it away and I fill it in.
So I am very big on IPFS, but as a like incentive layer for storage, like comparing Filecoin and Arweave. I tend to actually like Arweave more than Filecoin specifically, but I like IPFS above all of that.
Well, what is IPFS and Filecoin? Because it's confusing. I didn't understand the difference. We've been using IPFS for a couple of years, but Filecoin, I know they both were created by what are they called? Protocol Labs. Yeah. So just explain the difference between IPFS and Filecoin.
Protocol Labs is so cool, but I hate the fact it's called Protocol Labs because you can't really use protocol in the description. It's like one of those like explain an apple without explaining what an apple is. So IPFS is more a protocol and a system of sharing and transferring verifiable data between a peer-to-peer network. And how it works is you have different gateways and different hosts that allow you to move that data based on their SID or their, multi-hash. And that allows the data to kind of move and stuff. We used that a lot back in the days when we were working on a lot of real estate data. Filecoin is more designed to be a protocol on top of that incentivizes people to kind of build almost the S3 version of data storage, where you can pay to have your data stored and persisted on different types of hard disks or network hard drives, or NAS, so network interfacing drives, around the world. And the people who run that can do it in the background and are incentivized through the Filecoin token, which is FIL or something like that.
Yeah, Phil.
Yeah, or
Phil
yeah,
file. Yeah.
Phil
Yeah.
Fi. So it creates a way that you can decentralize and kind of goes, and this kind of, Brock, goes back to what we were talking about with Tegula and all. It replicates the data in a way across different networks. So this kind of goes back to what we were discussing, So that's kind of the main difference. Filecoin is the productization of the P2P network to ensure reliability and access to the information, where IPFS is the network itself.
Yeah, and like expanding on that a little bit. Yeah, IPFS is the way to access content. You get a content ID, that's the hash of the content. You can fetch it from the network, but there's no guarantee that the network still has the content you want. IPFS is just the protocol to right. IPFS is the protocol to define the content and share it between two peers, assuming one of the peers has it. But there's no incentive to keep that content if you don't actually want it and want to share it. So Filecoin is, that layer to incentivize node operators to store that data for some period of time. So there's like a guarantee mechanism in there.
Okay, so for us normal folks, just spitting it back to you, IPFS is basically if we want to decentralize data because we can't store, I don't know, big files on the blockchain. It's not really built for that. So we can use this new protocol called IPFS. But in order to incentivize them, just like you incentivize people to run ETH nodes or miners or now proof of stake stakers, so Filecoin's the actual incentive, the token, so that I'll run a node and I'll store Brock's data for X amount of time. And there's some kind of a contract between Brock and I.
Yep, exactly.
Correct. And it's just like, I know it runs in the background. I personally do not have this problem because I burn through hard drives like water. But like if you have of extra space, you can run a node and whatever you don't use.
If you're not John.
Hold up. But yeah, pretty much. So it pretty much incentivizes people to kind of maximize resources because hard drives are expensive. Yeah.
So like Filecoin underneath is its own blockchain, and there's a concept of miners, and those miners are like paid out in proof of space time. So like they're paid based on the amount of storage they're providing to the network, and users of that network access that data via IPFS. That's the like overarching tie.
I would say the one thing we should probably state and not confuse is when we say miners, they're not actually trying to solve a problem. They're just trying to understand who has the space and the capacity to accept a certain type of request. So when we say mining in the more traditional sense, you're trying to solve, that hashing rate.
But, that's what they're called.
Here, in this case, it's more who can store a terabyte of data in a reasonable way. That's proof of availability. Space time, which is availability in some capacity.
Localized, because there's also proof of replication.
I see.
So node operators.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, Stephen.
So no. I read an analogy years ago. Maybe this isn't a good one, but basically it was if I want to watch a YouTube video right now, I'm pinging Google server and basically, sort of that's how I'm getting the video, right? And the way that it was analogized was basically if I want to get that YouTube video, instead of going all the way to Google server and wherever Palo Alto or wherever, their nearest server would be to me, basically I would be grabbing or sort of grabbing caches from, let's say my neighbor watched the same video and his neighbor watched the same video and, vice versa. Basically, I'm grabbing bits of that video from this network that's closest to me rather than jumping all the way to, let's say, Palo Alto. Is that the way to think of it, or am I way out in left field?
No, I think that's the right way to think of it. And the issues with IPFS in that analogy then are that only really helps if your neighbors have the video and they want to have the video. Because if they don't, then you're going further out than maybe Google servers and it ends up being even slower. So if there's like virality to the video, then it works really well. If not, it works worse than today's internet.
And that's that's kind of like for our audience, there's like two layers here. There's the IPFS component, which is the transmission of the data itself, but it's also the availability and who's actually paying for that availability. Because the whole idea is to kind of pay for availability. So for me at in Fiera, we do pinning, so you have instant availability with IPFS. But if you don't have that, then to Brock's point, you could go past like a caching service that Google or whoever your local data center is, and you would have a worse experience. So it really comes down to where's the nearest cache, who's paying for it at that kind of Filecoin layer, and how much data is it actually? Because you're paying for it at the end of the day.
Do you have to, like, does each node have to cache the full video, or is it broken up into fragments and then stored on different nodes?
So it's based on I think it's 256 byte chunks. So I think the whole video would have to be, because it would, the hash. So so just for the audience, if you submit, what makes IPFS cool and interesting is that the hash is determined by the content values itself. So if you have a file that just says, hi Brock, or hi Steven, those hashes are unique. So no matter where it's uploaded, that data, it's unique to that hash itself. So the minute you change it, that hash changes. So if the video itself is represented by a single hash itself, or CID, it needs to be completely cached to get all the blocks it needs to actually serve that content.
Well, I was going to say, so I think to your point, Stephen, if you watch the video, you will end up caching an entire full complete copy of the video on your IPFS node. Your neighbors who may not have watched the video would theoretically just be like capturing pieces of it to help facilitate you watching it.
Okay.
So it can kind of work both ways depending on who wants it.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought that it would be helpful if there's a document that I want to back up on IPFS, or if I'm in exchange, right? Even a centralized exchange today, and we store all this really important information, this data. But if our systems go down or they get hacked, it's like, actually, we ran into this. We were helping an exchange, and we said, well, you could back it up on IPFS theoretically, but I'd want to take that data, like I would want to take like a contract, and I'd want to break it up into like millions of fragments, encrypt it, and then send it to different nodes. And then basically I, with my encryption key, could reassemble those. But it doesn't sound like that is what IPFS does.
Filecoin more so. Just Filecoin, you're sending it out to the network, and the network is guaranteeing to store it on your behalf. Mm-hmm. IPFS is you have to request the data. So it's a pull, not a push.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just real quick, John, you mentioned like pinning the data, and then also I know IPNS. I think that is pinning it, so you don't have to get a new hash each time you make a change to that. Can you explain, like, let's say we're using Google Docs and we're making changes to that doc. Well, that would have to be a new hash every time that we make a change to it. Is that what IPNS and pinning takes care of?
So pinning is more along the lines that it's kind of available. There's a high availability of that content, almost like a CDN. But for the other component, it's more along the lines that you're setting a global hash to all versions of the next. Pretty much, it's almost like you have a God hash, and every version afterwards is kind of pretty much tied to that initial hash. That way, that's how like people who like deploy websites, they can have websites on IPFS and version it to a DNS, record pretty much.
Yeah, IPNS is DNS for IPFS. It's the name system.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to bring in ENS and how that would work, but I won't do that right this second.
That would continue. Sorry.
Before we go into the pros and the cons of IPFS, I do want to talk about Arweave. So Brachiosaurus, tell us what Arweave is.
Yeah, so we talked about Filecoin. Filecoin does contract-based storage. So when you add something to the network, you are paying a fee to store it for a period of time. And that fee is based on how much data and how long. So there's like two elements there. Arweave is permanence. So you pay a one-time fee up front, and your data is guaranteed to be on the network forever. And so it's
that's a strong statement, my friend. You're gonna have to elaborate on that.
So the way it's fascinating how they go about this. They're also a blockchain, so adding that data as a transaction, you pay a small fee. Their token is AR.
Is that sustainable? I'm just going to say that straight up. How is that sustainable?
So the way it works is rather than incentivizing node providers by like proof of space-time, so like paying out node providers based on how much storage they have available, they pay out node providers based on how much and what type of data they're storing. So there's an emphasis here. I didn't see the details, but they do it based on proof of access. So if a particular data point isn't stored anywhere else on the network, the reward for storing that is higher. And so they kind of gamify the system. And so the idea is that all data is equally stored, because if it's not, then node providers are incentivized to store the data that is less readily available.
What kind of storage requirements would you have to have, though, for this network to work if it never gets deleted? So if I upload a photo and then in 25 years, I should be able to access that photo. But then if there's a lot of people like me that are doing that, and it's all the same fee, right? The fee is the same no matter what the data is?
No, the fee is different based on how much data. And there's a dynamic element to that based on like market usage or network usage.
It's almost like the same pricing model. Brock, correct me if I'm wrong. It's almost like the same pricing model that Azure and AWS has for like archived data versus hot data and like tapes. So it's almost like it's trying to bake a pseudo pricing model that's tied to hardware capacity into a software capacity, if that's the best way to describe it. I don't know how you would describe that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So it in Filecoin, you're almost directly paying a node provider to store your data for a period of time. Like there's a very direct relationship there, right? Arweave separates that. And so you have on one end, the user is paying the network broadly to store this data forever. And then Arweave, the network, is paying various node providers to keep track of that data. So the implication here is that just like Filecoin, no single node provider has to store everything. And there's even ways to use the term censor or choose what data you want to store. So like in the IPFS world, you don't know what data is being stored on your servers necessarily. With Arweave, you can put up like content filters. You can do things like this.
That's huge right now.
Right. And so by incentivizing it based on availability of the data, the idea is that, through gamification, all data gets stored permanently because somebody's willing to do it if the reward is high enough.
Right. So to that point, like this is a huge, just outside the protocol of IPFS in the Web3 space, which can be a topic of its own, but like the idea of Web3 is to prevent certain censorship between like governments and individuals who might be political rivals, but you still get certain cases of CP, for those who don't know, child pornography, terrorism. So even though you didn't explicitly request it or look at it, the fact it's on your server or the fact it's on your own computer running Filecoin or, this service, Arweave, breaks federal law, actually. So the law regulation has not caught up to data standards. So this is actually just one thing to think about, especially with all these different services running.
It's funny you say that. I just read something like yesterday that ISIS uploaded something to IPFS. And that's a question I don't know which department it was, but it was they're questioning how they're going to handle that, right? And people, I would be disincentivized to run an IPFS node for that very reason, because if somebody
But you
was,
don't know that. How are you supposed to know? That's the big issue with compliance right now in the IPFS space.
that's why I wouldn't run one.
Well, for the people that do run one and have to adhere to certain standards, unless they're looking at, and this goes outside the decentralized land and into just Web 2 and just technology itself. Facebook has for years hired people at minimum wage to filter content that has come through their system to flag it as bad or good. So pretty much they've used a human element to determine it. But that's not psychologically good. So how do you do it?
Well, I was going to say for Facebook, it's at least theoretically possible because Facebook is the input mechanism to that storage.
Correct.
In the decentralized web, anybody can participate.
Mm-hmm.
And you also can participate with encrypted data. So you can add content that nobody else can read except you.
Well, all I'm saying is that I mean, until there's clear regulation, I wouldn't want to run one of those nodes because, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like things are shaky enough in terms of just the financial regulation. Forget about having like child porn or something like that. I mean, if they wanted to come after you, I mean, yeah, it's kind of crazy because you're right. You're not looking at it. So,
you have it indirectly, you have it because you're a caching service at the end of the day.
Yeah. I guess we don't have to get into that because that's a
I think this goes outside of what we're discussing, but I think it ties more into what we discussed a few episodes back with Tornado Cash and what is the future of actual regulatory identity when it comes to Web3. And I think that's that we could just talk about that for hours in our episode, but definitely that we should.
Let me just ask an economic question. So it seems like, forget about all that stuff. If it's lucrative to run an IPFS node or an Arweave node, it seems like, I would want to run a few and I'd want to grow that. Just like, as we looked into Bitcoin mining, every year it gets harder and harder, and therefore it gets more centralized. And it'll be interesting to see where it ends up at the very end. But don't you see, just like at some point, if the economics are there, that we'll just see another AWS, large companies that raise money and they just house these warehouses of IPFS nodes around the world?
So that was happening with Filecoin for a long time. I forget what their peak market cap was, but I know it was huge in like the Asian market. There's tons of companies, individuals, just like Bitcoin mining, like running nodes to essentially mine Filecoin.
Because it was cheap. Energy and storage, especially in Asia, is cheap, and plus it gets into the kind of the geopolitics, but like especially running Filecoin in China and mainland Taiwan is huge for even Hong Kong. The movement of information, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's do the pros and cons of both, and then a use case. 100%. It sounds like IPFS is more short term, so I don't know that I would use that for anything. I like, I don't think I have a use case.
It's not short term. It's not short term. It's the underlying bedrock, I would say. Everything, how it's implemented and manipulated will become kind of that'll become the be all end all at the end of the day.
All right. Well, so then walk me through it. Yeah. Give me a use case for each.
So yeah, IPFS is ephemeral. Like it's, there's no guarantees of longevity. So it's great for like peer-to-peer file sharing, uploads. If you want to run your own IPFS node, I would suggest it as well. It's easy. You can add content. You can like share out photos to friends, whatever, doing it that way. Great solution to that. If you want to store something for a fixed period of time, Filecoin is great. Same protocol as IPFS, but you get the guarantees of it like existing for some period of time. And if you really want it to last forever, you want to archive the internet. I would say for NFT projects, they should be doing this. Put it on Arweave.
Yeah.
You get the permanence, and that data is always there.
Do you know? Do you guys can you download without the videos and maybe the photos? But can you download the internet? Like, can you go to Wayback Machine and download every web HTML page that's
I
ever
don't know if there's a way to
existed?
do it in bulk.
That would be a lot of data.
Yeah, like there's the Internet Archive, which is I forget if they're working with Filecoin or Arweave. I think Arweave, to like try to do this, but yeah, that's a huge undertaking.
That'd be cool. That's a. What's past petabytes? I don't even know what's past a petabyte.
I'd be curious to see how much storage you need for something like that. Because you can download Wikipedia, and it's not that big of a. I mean, it's a smaller file than you'd think.
Yeah.
No, I was just curious because, like, it'd be cool to be able to. I don't know if you were around. Do you remember like Microsoft Bob and like the early days of the internet? You can kind of resurface sometimes, but it's hard to find some of the really cool applications that existed like in the 90s. And I don't know, I just feel like it would be cool, like when we're 75, to go back and look at what things are like today. But I think even like 150, 200 years from now, there's it's good that somebody's doing it, and it would be great to put that on like Arweave if it really is going to be permanent.
That'd be really cool.
That's the idea.
Cool. All right. Well, look, this was a fun conversation. I learned a lot with Filecoin. Just confuses me. I don't know why when it comes to IPFS, but it's because we used it for so long without Filecoin. So it's like I get the economic though incentive. So Arweave seems pretty cool. I'm using thanks to Brock mirror.xyz. I think that runs on Arweave, right?
It does. Yeah. So you can we have a blog for our company, and that's stored on Arweave. And so I'm also indexing that data back off, so I can have a copy of all our blog posts, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So my wife, she started a blog, and she's doing this online like e-commerce boutique. And I set her up with mirror.xyz. I didn't really, her customers, you have to, the thing that may complicate things is that you have to have a wallet if you want to subscribe. And so I don't know that there's that many. It'll depend on her demographic, but I love how easy it is to use. So anyway, shout out Brock. Thanks for that. And John, have you played around with that?
I have not. I've been trying to get in more into Medium articles, but now I think maybe I should just move that over to Mirror. But yeah, 100%. I've been wanting to write more content about my own personal experience with flying as well as radio communications.
Should.
Yeah.
The business opportunity of the week for this episode is to have a
John's Cookies.
Well, John's Cookies, that was last week, but take mirror.xyz.
Did you buy the ENS?
I did. So we own that. Yeah, 100%.
That's going to be the company that takes.
Yeah, John's Cookies.
No, seriously though, business opportunity. You take mirror.xyz and replicate it on a Medium, and you offer that as a service. Somebody should do it. Like, it'd be easy.
Why isn't Medium doing that?
Well, Medium doesn't care. It's a competitor.
Yeah, but they don't own their content technically.
If you're a very wealthy individual or a VC, we have all these ideas. We just don't have the resources to build them. Yeah. Please contact us at hello@missinglinks.fm. We'll happily take your money and build out all these great tools. Cool. This was great.
Dream team, just the three of us. That's all you need.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is that you guys churn out. I mean, we build so much just to get to the product itself, because there's so much infrastructure missing that we should monetize these kinds of things. And Brock and I are doing that with the indexing company. But with John, we could do more things. But with that said, if you have feedback,
one day,
exactly, hello@missinglinks.fm, and then until next week, we'll talk to you later.